Welcome everyone to another 21st Capital show. It's Momo, the content manager at 21st Capital. Today we're discussing a truly historic moment. Ross Ulbricht is free. What does this pardon mean for personal freedom, the fight against government overreach, and the future of Bitcoin also? To break it all down, we have a distinguished guest joining us, Mohammad Machine-Chian. Mohammad is a senior researcher at the Center for Governance and Market at the University of Pittsburgh. He has spent years challenging centrally planned economies with market-driven alternatives and is the founder and editor-in-chief of Bourgeois, which is a pro-liberty online magazine in Persian, which is, from what I have understood and what I have read, is free of charge. If you're watching, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your comments below as we are live and we are able to ask our questions directly from Mohammed. Let's dive in. Welcome, Mohammed, to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So let's begin and start discussing how this historic moment that was really, for me, it was difficult to imagine that it one day really, I had that hope, but it was difficult for me to imagine that one day it would be realized. How did this come about?
Absolutely. It was an interesting story. Well, first of all, we may talk about it later, I'm not sure. But to begin with, the sentence for Ross Ulbricht was not really a fair sentence. Many people believed so. Nonetheless, President Trump, during his campaign, promised something interesting. He showed up in Libertarian Party convention. And historically, even though for the audience outside of the US, Libertarian Party is the third biggest party in the United States. Nonetheless, it's not really comparable to Democratic Party or the Republicans because it's a two-party system. Those two parties are huge. Libertarian Party, in comparison, is rather small. Nonetheless, they overperformed in the past couple of presidential cycles, and politicians noticed. So even though the Libertarian Party candidate had a very small chance, next to no chance, to become the next US president, his vote nonetheless became broke some, I can say, broke other candidates' votes. In other words, people that tended to, for example, vote for Republican, when they were not sure, they voted Libertarian, and some people from Democratic. But mostly, at least the consensus was, Libertarians took away some Libertarian voters. So in 2024 election, President Trump, he recognized this. It was genius to recognize this, I have to say. Nonetheless, he recognized this, and he showed up, and he told Libertarian voters that he too has some Libertarian tendencies. People were not really moved during that convention, and some people even started to boo the president, that no, you're not really a Libertarian, something on those lines. But again, President Trump showed resilience. He went on, he said, you know what? If you vote for me, if you elect me president, I promise you that I am going to pardon Ross Ulbricht. And that moved people. People reacted to that very positively. And that was a deal, apparently, that later on we learned about this, that there have been talks to the Libertarian Party leadership about President Trump. Obviously, we know he likes to make deals. And he asked them, what do you want to support me? And they thought about it. And it is fascinating that they chose uh, the pardon of Ross Ulbricht. They didn't ask for a rule or regulation to be diminished or something on those lines. They didn't ask for benefits from government or anything like that. It's very typical of a libertarian crowd to prioritize individual freedom of a pro-liberty person, especially. And in this case, it worked. President Trump promised to pardon Ross Ulbricht, and immediately after that, of course, libertarians uh, kept to their promise. They didn't run against President Trump. And in fact, as the result of this deal, libertarians received the least amount of votes in the past 16 years. Nonetheless, President Trump kept to his word as well, and he signed the pardon and made many libertarians around the world very happy.
Yeah, truly. And there is a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to get back to this introduction. Let's start with this one. You mentioned that the sentence of Ross was not a fair sentence. And let's look at it this way. Someone who is not a libertarian, someone who has heard about Ross from the media, and you are going to tell them it was before the election, and you are going to tell them that Trump is going to pardon Ross Ulbricht, and they would be like, who is Ross Ulbricht? And you would talk about Silk Road, and the first question would be probably, why would you want someone to pardon Ross Ulbricht? If you want to explain to someone the importance of his freedom and why you wanted his freedom, or for those who follow follow the mainstream media and think that he was a murderer, which he was not. It wasn't one of the charges against him. If someone comes up with that argument, what would be your quick way out of this, and how would you try to convince them that what they're thinking is not true?
Well, first of all, it was not proportional. So a justice system should sentence people according to the crimes they have committed. You mentioned that this is important to point out that he wasn't even, of course, he wasn't even charged for murder or accessory to murder, anything related to murder. But nonetheless, the judge mentioned that in her sentence, in her brief, uh, which goes to show that the severe sentence that he received was partly based on some accusations that he wasn't even charged about. And I can, by the way, unpack that part as well, because some people may wonder about, so what is it all about? It was based on a communication with a couple of corrupt agents, FBI, if I'm not mistaken, agents. By the way, those agents were prosecuted for embezzlement during uh, this whole case. So they were not really honest people. That they did bad things, and all the evidence that had any remote correlation between the murder or something were a series of text messages, and those text messages had been done using a certain ID, and that ID over the years had been used by several different administrators of the website, one of which, yes, was Ross Ulbricht. But other people over the years had also access to that account. Uh, Furthermore, even the person who was supposedly uh, uh, was going to be murdered, he too access to that account. He himself had access to that, and he said so. And he said, no, it wasn't Ross Ulbricht. He had nothing to do with that. So that was absolutely bogus. The interesting thing is that what grabbed my attention was the judge's brief, the judge's sentence. The judge basically condemned, sentenced Russ Ulbricht such a severe sentence because she thought, Russ Ulbricht thought himself above the law of the land. Russ Ulbricht thought he was better than the laws governing the US, and he didn't believe in the laws. And he wanted to make an example out of him. Otherwise, he did nothing deserving for life sentence, let alone several life sentences in prison. He never hurt anybody. He was not a violent person. He never committed any sort of crime. He was never he never did something uh, to damage anybody, basically. And so the crimes he did, uh, well, I'm saying crime because legally speaking, they were crimes. Nonetheless, those crimes were victimless. They say that some people bought illegal drugs on Silk Road, and they used those drugs, and they paid a high price for using those drugs. But these people were adult individuals. They decided that they wanted to buy drugs, and they did so, and they decided they wanted to take drugs. And this is important because some people, when they hear these things from libertarians, it scares them. The thing is, as an individual, I'm not saying that using drugs is a good thing. I'm not encouraging anybody to use drugs, and I'm not taking drugs myself. However, I recognize every individual, their rights to choose to poison their own body. Many people drink. We do know for a fact that drinking is not good for you. Many people smoke. We do know for a fact that smoking is not really benefiting your health. In fact, it has detrimental effect on you. Nonetheless, if you choose to smoke, I understand. And I recognize your right as an adult to smoke or to drink. And I will choose for myself. That's the whole libertarian sentiment, basically. And so did Russ Ulbricht. Uh, Silk Road website, basically, as he said so, it was a social experiment to provide a platform in which adult individuals could go there, could decide for themselves. And by the way, this is a marketplace in which you can trade drugs. At the same time, there was, I had seen it, there was sections that would warn against using drugs. There were sections on the website that would tell people what to do if not to misuse drugs. And if there was effects, there was guiding them through it. And those kinds of information, unfortunately, in our societies were never accessible to many people. So he provided those kinds of information as well to the individual.
Yeah, there is a kind of social experiment going on right now, and that social experiment is the country that we both come from, and that is Iran. There, alcohol is prohibited, and the effects of that, is it really people not drinking alcohol? No, people do drink alcohol, make their own alcohol, make their own beer, make their own distilled alcohol, and well, that is no harm done there. People can get access to the alcohol when they want it. But the problem is that, at least in the country I'm living, I have never heard anyone getting alcohol from a shop, even the cheapest alcohol, and get any side effects such as blindness and death. But this is a kind of side effect that we do see in Iran, because it's a black market. You cannot sue anyone for giving you bad alcohol. There is no real competition. So they are just, the dealers just think about selling it to some people, and fattening their bag, and then maybe go to another city or whatever. So we have that kind of social experiment. And could you also expand on your view about drugs and how they are treated now, and how libertarians want it to be treated? Some part of the answer, I think, was clarified in your explanation about how the Silk Road um, handled, classified, and warned about drugs. Um, this is a kind of subject that people need to hear more about so that they get used to it, becomes more common to the ears. Um, what else can you add to, and what kind of regulations or lack thereof do you expect with respect to drugs?
Oh, absolutely. That's a good question. But to begin with, let me briefly touch on something I find very interesting. When a libertarian person establishes a website, a libertarian website, he calls it Silk Road. And Silk Road, historically, we know that it was a trade route going through Iran. Iran was a big part of Silk Road. And so what I'm getting at is that we were there, and trade has always been open trade, free trade, has always been part of our culture, and being open to other, uh, not just goods, but also uh, values, traditions, and so forth. Because trade is not just in goods and services; it's also uh, about other achievements of every civilization. And we have always been at the forefront of this trade. And unfortunately, for about the past half a century, we've had walls around our country, and Iran these days is unfortunately very isolated. Nonetheless, I'm saying that we are capable, and in fact, it is part of our culture to be part of the international community. But as when it comes to uh, drugs and alcohol, you're absolutely right. In fact, they also had a similar experiment in America during it is called prohibition. They also outlawed alcohol, and exactly what is happening these days in Iran happened in the U.S. as well. People continue to drink. In fact, Iranian people are drinking above the average about around the world. And you're absolutely right. The quality isn't necessarily there because there are no brands, and people, and the law of the land, the law in Iran does not support an individual if they get hurt using a subpar and, uh, less a product with subpar quality. They have nowhere to go, and the training isn't there. Or, for example, in the U.S., a minor can never buy alcohol because they have to go to a shop and they have to show credentials, an ID or something like that. But in Iran, we started buying alcohol very young because we had the temptation and it was illegal. So when it's illegal, they sell you. They're not prohibited by any laws, basically, because there are no laws. And as the byproduct, you see, unfortunately, just in the past year, how many people in Iran have died of very small dosage of alcohol consumption because the alcohol was it was uh, poisoned them, basically. I can say that. Uh, and many people lost their sight. They got blinded, and some people died, unfortunately, because of this. Even though those people were not alcoholics, They were not consuming large amounts of alcohol. They did not commit any sort of socially act that was bad or anything. These are, as it turns out, one of the recent cases, some people they were medical doctors and so forth themselves.
Yes, yes,
They had a small party and they were drinking very moderately. Unfortunately, all of them were poisoned. Some of them died. Some used their sight, which is heartbreaking, basically. And when it is illegal, when people are buying these things illegal, the quality may not be there. There is no basically framework because when I go out with friends and if we drink, it is a social thing. So in that social environment, you get to understand what is too much, what is a moderate
yes,
amount. You learn about these things. When things are illegal, you never learn anything about it. If you develop a problem, you have nobody to talk to, and things like that. So these are very important things. And when it comes to drugs, this is even more important. It is more important to be able to go to a trustworthy source, which was, by the way, one of the priorities of Russ Ulbricht website. He wanted the drugs in his platform to have a decent quality. I do realize that it may sound crazy to many people. Yes, I don't take drugs and I don't like drugs, but it is important because so many people every year get hurt, not because they overuse drugs or they're drug addicts or anything like that. And even so, what if they're drug addicts? I think if they can go to a reputable place to buy drugs, and if they learn about the hazardous side of the drugs, and if they have a problem, they develop a problem, they have someone to talk to. And these things can help reduce the heartbreaking cases that happens around it, around drug use. And we should be able, in every society, we should be able to talk about these things. These are important. So basically, by prohibiting it, you're not solving any problems. You're just pushing it under the carpet, as we say in Iran. And by pushing it under the carpet, you're not solving anything. The problem is there. Many people, vulnerable people, would try to use those illegal things and they get hurt. If there are no laws against it, people may experiment. They see the effects in a safe environment and they may decide not to continue. And if they need help, they have a place to receive some help. Nonetheless, worst case scenario, what if an adult individual decides to poison himself? It's his right. I recognize a right. And by the way, it's not just drugs or alcohol or smoking or things like that. Let me tell you a quick story. I had one of my friends growing up. He was interested in playing guitar. I thought it was a waste of time. I didn't think it was a good idea, especially in Iran. What are you going to do? How are you going to make money by playing guitar? I didn't care for it. I didn't have any interest in it. Nonetheless, he was very much interested, invested in that. I recognized that. And that's about it. And now he's a musician and he's very
yes,
successful. So, what I'm saying is, we may or may not like many things that other people do, but we have to recognize as adult individuals, they have a right to choose how they want to live for themselves. And by the way, they are going to pay the price or reap the rewards.
true.
So
As it
that's
was,
the whole libertarian thing.
yeah, as it was the case with your friend who played guitar and he's now a great musician.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the side effects that we see are not because of the drug. When you go to a social gathering and drink alcohol, if you drink too much, you would pass out, you would throw up, you would pass out. The next day, you would have a bad headache. and you can learn it from your friends. You can learn it even from your parents when it is when you receive some education about it. But if it is all in some kind of hidden and underground setting, how difficult you could imagine how difficult it would be to get reliable information. Yeah, and something else that I would like to touch on is, uh, don't get me wrong, I am really personally, um, I would prefer President Trump over Kamala every day of the week. But when I look at his views, I don't see someone who is a true libertarian. And I do not see that he really understands libertarianism. First, I thought that maybe him deciding to pardon Russ Ulbricht was just a kind of presidential part of his presidential campaign. To what extent do you think President Trump has understood and embraced libertarianism?
Well, I would agree with you in the sense that he's not necessarily in favor of many libertarian ideals. For example, the tariff war, that is
Exactly.
as
That's what I wanted to raise. Yeah.
that is as anti-libertarian as it comes. Nonetheless, the Ross Ulbricht case in particular, that was about he made a promise. He understood his audience. His audience were libertarians. They cared about Ross Ulbricht, and they unanimously, every libertarian, I have never met a libertarian that thought, yes, the sentence of Ross Ulbricht was fair. We didn't think so. And he recognized that. He's a smart person, I would say that. And he recognized that and he made a deal. He's also very good at making deals. And the deal was, do not undermine my votes. Don't take away my votes, and I'm going to pardon this person. So the pardon of Ross Ulbricht wasn't exactly a pro-libertarian sort of statement. It was a deal with libertarians, libertarian people, libertarian voters, and some of those voters, they actually, and this is politics, right? Because politicians, it is important when and if they recognize these kinds of things. Some people, Joe Rogan, for example, and many people similar to him, they voted for Trump. Their priority was not necessarily what wasn't Ross Ulbricht. He wasn't on their radar. What they cared about was to declassification of JFK and a couple of more Area 51 and a couple of declassification things that President Trump could actually do. And President Trump promised that to them, which again, as it happens, I completely agree with them on that as well. So President Trump, his campaign was a very smart campaign. He recognized many specific things that certain groups of people cared about. He promised things that he could deliver, and he delivered. So that's the most important, to be honest with you. But yes, and he said so. He said, I'm a libertarian. In that convention, in libertarian convention, his explanation was that I have been prosecuted or persecuted by government, by states, on 90 plus counts. And I do understand state overreach and encroachment. On that, I'm sure President Trump is a libertarian. But on other issues, for example, tariffs and open trade, he's probably not a big fan.
Uh, would you be able to speak to this tariff war and its side effects? I would be interested to hear more about that. What would you think would be the side effects of this tariff, and what would have been the correct approach if not
Well,
tariffs?
first of all, absolutely. Um, when it comes to tariffs, it is an established fact of economics that tariff wars have no winners. is a lose-lose. It's a lose-lose game. Both American people and people from other countries who the tariffs are imposed upon, uh, they both will lose. There are a handful of winners in a tariff war. More specifically, they are the owners of certain industries that will benefit from tariffs. Those are the only winners of a tariff war. But to give you an example, uh, they imposed a tariff against washing machines, against foreign imported washing machines in the United States, LG, Samsung, things like that. And the expectation was to increase job opportunities on similar industries inside of the US. But that's not what happened. After they imposed those tariffs, the price of a washing machine in the US significantly increased. The government of the US received around $80 million worth of tariffs on washing machines. American people paid more than $1.5 billion. They paid another more $1.5 billion buying more expensive washing machines, not better washing machines, not more quality or anything like that. The same, or in some cases worse. And only 1,800 new jobs were created in the US. And so if you calculate that, it's about $850,000 per job, which is very, very expensive. Basically, to create a job in the US, you don't need $800,000. And by the way, when you study that even further, you see that some jobs have been destroyed by those tariffs as well. So when you calculate these things, you see that everybody's a loser at the end of the day, even US industries, because when you impose tariffs, you create imbalance in the comparative advantage of the economy. Every economy has some comparative advantage, and Adam Smith teaches us that we should focus on what we can on our comparative advantage. If, for example, if you're very good at fishing, and you can also gather fruits well as well. And I'm much better at gathering fruits, and I can fish, but not as good as you. Economics tells us that you should focus solely on fishing, and I should focus on gathering fruits. As the result, we will end up with more fish and more fruits, both of us. That's how economics works. But when you impose tariffs, uh, the industries in your country have an incentive to produce something that they cannot really produce at an advantage, because if there was no tariff, they couldn't compete. So it creates an imbalance in competition, and it raises the prices for everybody, and it's not good. Nobody's winning out of this. And there are explanations. Some people say that President Trump wasn't really trying to impose all sorts of taxes. He was trying to bring people to the negotiating table. For example, Mexico, Canada, to do something about the illegal immigration, about the drug smuggling and things like that. And he has been successful about that. And he's not going to insist or continue those tariffs in the long run. And when it comes to China, the case is a bit different. And by the way, tariffs against Chinese companies in the past never worked. If anything, it made Chinese industries even more aggressive. But nonetheless, the theory says that Chinese industries are selling their goods with a marginal better quality in the US market, but at a much higher price. And President Trump thinks if he imposes tax on China, as the result, the end price for the U.S. consumer will not really increase to a significant degree, but at the same time, he can tax Chinese industries. So that's the idea. But in practice, I don't think even the tariffs on China would really improve U.S. to any degree.
So it's been tried and we have seen the results of it, but we need to just try them again to prove that we are wrong again. Yeah. And first and foremost, I can say that the Bitcoiners, the Bitcoiners community is aware of Russ Ulbricht not because they were first libertarians, but because they were first Bitcoiners. Maybe even their first trades, maybe their first encounter with Bitcoin was through the Silk Road. There are people who openly say that. One of them is Peter McCormick, whose mom was suffering from cancer and he would get marijuana over the Silk Road. And we are first and foremost a Bitcoin show, and we are active in Bitcoin security. Uh, Although we do have libertarian views or anarchist views, and definitely free market views, I am curious to know your own views as a libertarian on Bitcoin from someone who probably, it is my assumption that you were first a libertarian. For me, I became first a Bitcoiner, and then the leftist cells in my body died away, and I became more pro-liberty and also anarchist leaning. I'm interested to know your background and your introduction to Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin to you?
Oh, absolutely. In my case, yes, you're absolutely right. I was first a libertarian, and then long before the advent of crypto. Nonetheless, because I was a libertarian, I embraced Bitcoin. And I was an early adopter. I made a small fortune by buying Bitcoin very early, although I'm so sorry that at some point I sold a big portion of my portfolio because I wanted to rent a larger place, and I needed deposits, and I wasn't really trading Bitcoin. I just had an investment. In my wallet I had a few Bitcoins, and so I sold. If I'm not mistaken, 5 Bitcoins to get my deposit. And at the time, if I'm not mistaken, Bitcoin was about $1,000 a Bitcoin. So I sold 5 Bitcoins, $5,000, got my deposit, and later on, I regretted that decision to this very day. Nonetheless, I embraced Bitcoin. I loved the technology, the concept behind it. And I think, unfortunately, because of government overreach, Bitcoin couldn't really realize many of its potential because of all sorts of rules and regulations and limits imposed upon Bitcoin. Otherwise, I think today we should have been using Bitcoin, different aspects of Bitcoin and crypto, I should say, different aspect of crypto to achieve many services that we want to, from signing a contract with someone, renting a home, that all of that could be achieved using crypto. And I think crypto is the future. I think there is still a great deal of potential. And on a personal note, I think Bitcoin will play a significant role in ensuring the freedom of Iranian people uh, to, uh, to fight the current regime. And I have been saying that. I've met a few US politicians in the past couple of years, and each time I have been repeating this sentiment that because the US politicians are talking about how can we help Iranian people, because they know there's a rift, there's disagreement between Iranian people and the Islamic Republic regime. And Iranian people have been very clear, saying very out loud, taking every chance to say that the regime is not representing them, and they want to live their own lives. Iranian people want to decide how they want to live, what they want to drink, what they want to listen to, and what movies they want to watch, and things like that. They want to have a normal life. Unfortunately, in Iran currently, they cannot do many of those things. But I think Bitcoin can play a significant role helping Iranian people to liberate themselves from, because remember that one of the biggest, uh, certainly the biggest crises in Iran is the hyperinflation in the country, and the devalued fiat money uh, of the regime, which Iranian people hate that currency, to be honest with you. And they would use Bitcoin more frequently to achieve, to trade more things if they were allowed, if they were recognized by, crypto platforms, reputable crypto platforms. But unfortunately, because of sanctions, Iranian people don't have access to those services and platforms. And I think I've been appealing to US politicians to recognize this very important thing. And if they want to support Iranian people, they should recognize Iranian people's rights to trade, to be part of the international community on crypto platforms, and to trade not huge amounts, but micro amounts that make sense for an ordinary Iranian citizen. And I think that will make a difference. Remember, more than half of Iran's GDP is in services. And if Iranian people can use Bitcoin, they have absolutely no reason to continue spending the devalued fiat money in Iran. They would, almost all Iranians would prefer to use crypto, and I think it is possible. It is achievable. We just have to convince a few more politicians.
Yeah, and actually, the Iranian government has also recently, quite recently, maybe a month, since a month ago, has limited the exchanges in Iran, and people and Iranians have to go through so much difficulty for buying a small amount of Bitcoin or crypto in general. So that's the war that is fought in Iran. And the other problem is the sanctions. And that seems to me a great um, proposition, but how actionable do you think it is? Because when you talk to an American politician, AML laws are written into, infiltrated into their bones. Uh, what is your, what strategy would you use? How would you talk to them to sound more convincing?
You're absolutely right. Because, and this is important, by the way, to recognize, we already have large number of Iranian people having a crypto wallet. They do. Many Iranians, even now, despite all the sanctions and limits imposed by the Islamic Republic regime as well, they continue to trade. And yes, they recently, because they noticed that large numbers of people are converting their all they have basically, because they no Iranian wants to keep Iranian rial. They want to convert it to something else. Back in the day, it was either gold or foreign currency, and government started to impose all sorts of rules and regulations and taxes, and nowadays, if you want to buy gold, it's very you have to pay an extra on taxes, and uh, so the overhead cost has increased significantly, and the price of gold in Iran is much higher than your average price of gold internationally, for that reason. And same story when it comes to foreign currency. Even they criminalized holding large sums of US dollars or European euros. So when Bitcoin came along, and that is partly why I invested in Bitcoin back in the day, because I didn't want to keep my what I earned. I wanted to convert it to something else. I didn't want to hold gold in my house because I had a small apartment. I didn't want to. I didn't have a safe or anything like that. It was uncomfortable. So I invested in Bitcoin, and still many people in Iran do that. The thing that I've been trying to convince U.S. policymakers about is that, look, unfortunately, because of sanctions, the intention of sanctions is to limit the regime. It's not trying to really make the life of ordinary people more difficult. At least that is not the intention. So it is as if we, the Iranian people, don't exist to the international community when, for example, we want to open an account and on any reputable platform, which is a bad thing. But there is no price for the U.S. policymakers. Uh, my pitch is that allow an Iranian person to trade less than $2,000 a month, and they will provide credential so they can post their passports to be confirmed. So the KYC policies can recognize Iranian people, can admit Iranian people, and to be able to trade on, say, crypto.com or whatever, Binance or what have you. And and I have received some positive feedback from certain policymakers, but we have to do much, much more, and we have to be able to convince more policymakers, which I would say would be more likely in the President Trump's administration, uh, because he's pro crypto to a degree, and I think if he sees a way that doesn't cost U.S. taxpayers anything, basically to empower Iranian people to break the yokes of the Islamic Republic and to be able to trade outside the fiat money. It is a beautiful way of undermining the regime. It is a beautiful way of limiting the power, because at the moment that is a byproduct of fiat money, because the government can tax you by imposing inflation. Basically, they are robbing your pocket, and Iranian people can use Bitcoin. The regime would never be able to do that again. So I think it's feasible, to be honest. The more I think about it, the more I talk about it.
Yeah, that's actually a very good convincing point that it doesn't, cost them to remove those laws, and actually imposing them is what is costly. Right. So we covered so many bases. I learned a lot from this conversation. I want to be respectful of your time. So if you have anything to add at the end of the interview, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you very much for having me. It was fascinating. I didn't know about 21st Capital, but after our conversation, I looked at it fascinating. Sounds great. And I hope we stay in touch. And this is the beginning of a long friendship.
Definitely. Thank you. Honored to hear that. And thank you, our dear audience, for staying with us. And see you the next time. Have a great rest of the day or night, wherever in the world you are.